toxicants or degrade organic materials that will release nutrients back to the soil. So it's a broad range of impact. And in that situation too, the farmers can no longer cultivate until the environment is detoxified. And that is basically what we are doing at Hybrid. So we are decontaminating oil-impacted lands as well as wetlands. And then we are doing shoreline cleanup and mangrove restoration to restore the traditional livelihoods of the people, which is basically farming. But our approach is to also promote research that will lead to total recovery. In those lands that have been impacted, we try to decontaminate them to meet the regulatory threshold that is set by the National Oil Spill Detection Agency. When we get to that threshold, then NOSRA will certify. But we are also concerned about local farmers that plant vegetables and other crops, given the fact that in decontaminated land, there is the tendency that the residual oil or the residual hydrocarbon can still bioaccumulate in the planted crops and still remain in the food chain. So in order to deal with that situation, what we have done is to initiate what might be called green remediation. So we want to further decontaminate certified land that we have remediated to levels that will never cause any form of harm to the farmers before we return back the decontaminated land to the farmers. So what we have done is to isolate some beneficial microbes and use them in conjunction with an Indian company called Contact Global. So we have isolated the microbes that degrade hydrocarbon from ogoni. So they are indigenous microbes. And then we use them to produce what we call oil zappa. And oil zappa helps in further removing residual oil from the environment. Then we also isolate some of the strains of microbes and use them in producing biofertilizer. And that biofertilizer is to enhance the fertility of the soil in order to enhance the yield of the cultivars. We have done an experiment with these two products with the postgraduate students from the University of Port Harcourt. We planted 5 different cultivars, different local crops that the farmers usually cultivate in a comparative manner. So we compared oil zappa alone with versus oil zappa and the biofertilizer versus no application of either oil zappa or the biofertilizer. And we've seen tremendous results, very, very obvious and significant results, whereby in plots that we planted we planted these cultivars after treating the soil with a combination of the oil zappa and the biofertilizer. The yield is significantly higher than in the other plot. So we are doing all this. And it is important to note that from the perspective of air pollution with hydrocarbon, especially whether PM 2.5 or PM 10, there's the tendency that the no matter how fine the particles are, they always stick together and then deposit. And when they deposit on the soil. So there will be in pollution-prone environment, there's the tendency, like the Niger Delta, there's the tendency that even in areas that there's no visible oil spill, the agricultural land can also be impacted by hydrocarbons through atmospheric deposition from the air. So our approach as critical stakeholders should be that of collaboration and multidisciplinary. So we have to look at it from the total environment and initiate policies that we prevent contamination as much as possible, and also initiate policies that enhances decontamination as quickly as possible, and also invest a lot in sensitization of the citizenry, and also invest in what is called citizen science. So citizen science, whereby the local people can also be trained to obtain data that can help in policy formulation. And that can only be achieved through training, through collaboration, through open conversation and policy support. I don't know the time you've given to me to speak, but I think I'm still here. If you are hearing me.
Sure, I can hear you.
So I can pause and then you can ask any other question.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. That was amazing.
But I think going forward, you give me a specific time, because as I'm talking, I'm also afraid that I might be, taking
going on and on and on and on. Okay. Okay, noted. Thank you. That's amazing work you people are doing at High Prep, and I want to really commend the good work. Well done, Prof. And thank you for the insight and sharing your expertise on this question. Thank you. So before I come back to you, I have one more question before I go around, but I want to quickly acknowledge the presence of our third speaker for the day, Dr. Achibong Akban. Thank you for joining us. Please, if you can hear me, can you say hello to our listeners?
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry that jumping in that I have a series of questions before now. I'm glad to be here.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Professor Zabi. I have one more question for you. I mean, hearing all the things you people are doing at High Prep, I'm pretty sure there will be challenges that that occurs during the process of trying to create impacts for to work on the impact of the hydrocarbons. So what are the biggest challenges in balancing environmental remediation with restoring livelihoods?
I think you were breaking.
Okay, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, better now. So maybe you repeat yourself so that I can get full range of it.
All right. All right, thank you. So I was asking, what are the biggest challenges in balancing environmental remediation with restoring livelihoods in polluted agricultural regions?
So, in a region where the people are predominantly farmers and fishers, and then the environment is contaminated. So both the creeks and the agricultural lands are contaminated. Then you'll be grappling with issues of livelihoods, because the people can no longer farm, they can no longer fish in those contaminated environments. So, and that's why our mandate also includes creating alternative livelihood opportunities for the people. So we try to do that by investing in structured training to diversify the economy. So we train the people, especially the youth and women, in different skill areas. We have trained 5,000 youth and women in Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So before my network dropped, I was saying that we are training the youth and women to diversify livelihood opportunities through skill training, through scholarship, through a whole lot of livelihood packages. We've trained some in aviation. Some of them are already employed as cabin crew on 2 different airlines. We have trained 5,000 in different ski areas and provided them with starter kits. We have trained 100 in aviation, in seafaring, another 100 in creative arts. And then we have also supported cassava farmers in the region because it's not every land in Ogoni that is contaminated. So the contamination are basically confined to hotspot communities where there are oil facilities like Wellhead or the community land is traversed by a pipeline, maybe the Trans-Niger pipeline that is that can possibly corrode and spill oil. And then mostly the coastal areas, especially in the mangrove areas that artisanal oil refining and oil theft activities took place, are the major hotspots. So the areas of part of Ogoni that are not contaminated are still being cultivated. And so for that reason, we've been able to train 200 cassava farmers, supported them with improved cassava stems, and also supported them with fertilizer. I think this year we have put in place some contracts that will be implemented early next year. So from January, that are agri-based. It also includes rabbitry, it includes aquaculture, and even crop production. So all that we are doing then concurrently. And in order to optimize our livelihood opportunities, especially for the people we have supplied with startup kits and trained them. For example, those who are into argon welding and similar trade, we need to cut down on the cost of electricity. So for that reason, HyPrep invested in the Ogoni Power Project. The Ogoni Power Project will connect all Ogoni communities to the national grid, and that will make electricity supply in Ogoni to be relatively stable. And there is the potential to convert it to a generating system when gas supply is guaranteed. So all these things are happening concurrently. And in order to also optimize the livelihood opportunities, we also create direct jobs. So we have created over 7,000 direct jobs. Various of them, 2,000 are working on a shoreline cleanup, on 34 cleanup sites along the shoreline of Ogoni. 500 are working. 500 are working on a mangrove restoration project. We are about to start the phase 2 of it. So more Ogoni youth and women will be recruited. And in order to also optimize the mangrove restoration project, we have also trained 90 Ogoni youth and women in mangrove nursery management. And we supported them with grants with which they were able to set up their individual nursery. And interestingly, the 90 that we trained, in turn, trained 305 members of their families, because, we didn't just train them without leaving them with something. We produced a mangrove restoration manual that is based on the context of the Niger Delta, that is even applicable to the whole Gulf of Guinea. And so for the first time in the Gulf of Guinea, we've been able to produce a manual that will enable anybody that is interested in restoring mangroves to be able to restore not just the red mangrove that used to be the common practice, but also to restore different species, including the white and the black mangrove. So that is one of the value addition of our project. So we trained them and gave them the manual, we gave them money, and then they in turn use our manual to train additional 305 persons in the community who also set up mangrove nurseries. So in fact, after...
That's incredible, Prof.
Yes. In fact, we needed like 1.5 million seedlings, and then they produced excess of 5 million.
Wow.
And so the good thing, and one of our excitement, is that Ogoni now has the capacity to produce mangrove seedlings that will be able to restore the whole of the Niger Delta. And so when you link it to the recently submitted NDC, that is Nationally Determined Contribution 3.0, that was submitted by the Nigerian government before the COP30, with the ambition of restoring 13,000 hectares of mangroves in Nigeria to contribute to mitigating climate change. Already we have taken off 3,000 on our project, and ours is not even that straightforward. We have to decontaminate before we restore. So it's pretty difficult. It's very difficult. But in areas that the loss of mangrove is not as a result of the contamination of the environment with hydrocarbon, then it's very straightforward. So the people we have trained in Ogoni and those they have in turn trained have the capacity to produce seedlings of the red, black, white mangrove that will be able to restore the remaining 10,000 hectares that Nigeria has.
That's really amazing.
To contribute. So all that we are doing currently.
Thank you so much, Prof. That's really, I'm quite impressed hearing all these figures and how HyPrep has been able to train the communities in order to cope the challenges they face from environmental pollution. Thank you so much, Prof. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will come back to you, but let me quickly get to hear from our other speakers as well. But before I continue, I would like to.
I'm here. So
Okay, yes,
we
sure.
are
I will
lucky.
come back to you.
So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Ethel, you're muted.
Thank you, Howard. So I was saying that before I get to hear from other speakers as well, I'd like to quickly say that this webinar is being aired live on Business Day Television on YouTube at businessday.ng. Thank you for joining us. So you can also stream live there, and it's something that you can go back to rewatch as well. And also, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. We'll be looking at it and then, take the question towards the ending part. So let me get to hear from Hawa. Hawa is the manager at Sahel Consulting Agricultural and Nutrition Limited. So Hawa, based on Sahel's engagement with farming communities, what on the ground evidence have you observed about the ways air pollution disrupts planting cycles, soil fertility, and smallholder productivity?
Thank you, Ethel, for the question. So just to go straight into answering it. So I would say that I would start with something like land preparation. So when it comes to land preparation, bush burning is still very much an activity that farmers still carry out. Some of them know the effects, but they believe that it's a faster process than mechanization, using slashers as an example, but they still go ahead with that process instead. And the effects of something like bush burning is not only the fact that fire is something that can easily get out of control, and not only does it, yes, it burns the land, but it can also easily spread to other farmlands as well. But one thing that happens is that as it's burning the land, it also affects soil fauna, and other microbes that might be within the soil. So let's say earthworms, for example. So earthworms are present within the soil. They do, because of their movements, they carry out some form of soil aeration, which allows nutrients, oxygen, calcium to be able to flow through the soil. Once you've done something like bush burning, it not only depletes and kills the earthworms, but there are no nutrients that are flowing through the soil. So this bush burning gets the soot from the burning the bush or clearing the land gets into the air. Once it gets into the air, the soot in the air then settles on top of the soil, and that then forms like a crusty soil top. The top of the soil becomes crusty and it hardens in its own way. So it becomes even difficult for the farmers to carry out their farming activities. And in some cases it delays planting as well, because by the time this has happened, it takes a lot more time for you to, I believe, fight the soot and fight the crustiness of the topsoil. Then when you look at, like now, for example, we're towards the Harmattan season, and in most parts of the north, it becomes very foggy and it becomes dry. And when that dryness happens, especially in the morning, there can be humidity in the air. So most of the time, farmers might be unsure of whether to proceed with planting or whether not to proceed with planting. Not necessarily that the air is polluted, but they do not want a situation where they plant and something goes wrong. So they might hold off for some time, and when they do hold off for some time until they find some form of assurance, the remaining time left within the planting cycle would have significantly reduced. And when it comes to livestock, just like very similar to human beings, once there's pollution in the air and you are constantly breathing this in and taking it in, it causes diseases, it causes respiratory problems. So if you look at livestock, for example, and I'll use poultry as an example, when you look at a poultry pen and you have all the poultry locked within the same space, even without air pollution, if there is a disease with one chicken, it spreads very quickly to the other chickens and they die or they're all sick. So it's really the same thing with things like air pollution. So their pens need to be properly ventilated to ensure that any harsh chemicals or anything that is in the air that can easily affect them can pass through, and the air is properly filtered. And I would say the same also for cattle. Now, when it comes to even human beings, and you think of a typical Nigerian farmer, when the air is polluted, it affects their respiratory system. So it's the same way as human beings when we have a flu. That's when we remember that, something as simple as breathing is so important. And they would, once that happens and they have some form of respiratory issues, they are unable to farm. So unless they're not the ones farming and they have access to good labor and other means of carrying out agricultural activities, then they're able to increase productivity. But if they're sick and let's say it's something that's spreads across to their family or to the laborers within their community, productivity halts, productivity stops. And once productivity stops, in turn it affects everyone. And when we think of going back to the idea of livestock as well, and back to cattle, and I'm just going to keep using soot from let's say smoke as an example, So when we think of the feed for cattle, most of the time let's say the feed is made for cattle. Once it is contaminated with any chemicals or anything within the air, and the cattle consume the feed. Now, remember that even though some of them might be given antibiotics and be taken care of appropriately, this actually then gets to human beings. In some cases, these cattle may die. They get infected with something. And if they're infected with something, in turn, it affects milk, it affects beef. Once you see that the quality of, let's say, the milk that you are getting from your cattle is below par or it's bad due to, let's say, contaminated feed from particles or chemicals or soot within the air, you're unable to use that milk. You're unable to send that to producers. You're unable to process that milk. And that then becomes a waste. And we have to also ensure that we are taking precaution. Because I believe, like you said at the beginning of the session, air pollution is not something that we generally think of, because in most cases, it's not something that we can see. We can feel it to an extent, but we actually cannot see it. Unlike let's say pests and weeds and things like that, basically. So and when you also think about crops as well, you would also see that when the weather changes, especially in the past couple of years, where climate change has become very uncertain for the average farmer, we also have to look at pollination. And we've gotten reports before that, and I believe cannot pinpoint the state at the moment, but it was obvious that the bees that were within that field pollinating the crops had significantly reduced. And by reduced, I actually mean they were no longer there. And that in turn reduces pollination because those bees contribute to the growth of those crops, to moving on to harvesting those crops for them to generally flourish and for productivity to increase. So just in summary, when we think of air pollution and we think of the negatives within it, we also have to treat animals and crops, or livestock rather, and crops the same way we would as human beings. even though we cannot see it, we do feel it in the air, and we need to take the appropriate precaution just to ensure that we are not inhaling things that could affect our health. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Howard. Thank you for breaking down this question, how air pollution affects crops productivities, and also how it affects soil fertilities and smallholder productivity. That was amazing. Thank you so much. You really did justice to the question. Before I go to the next question, I want to just ask you this second question. How can advisory firm like Sahel strengthen government capacity to integrate environmental risks, especially air pollution? I know you spoke a lot about the damages it causes on agricultural production and productivity. So how can they, strengthen this capacity to integrate environmental risk into agricultural and rural development strategies?
So I would say, I will touch on two points for that. So I would say that when you want to, basically when you're working with the government, whatever it is that the government or any advisory agency is bringing out, basically, the idea is that it gets to the last mile, and in this case, to the farmer. And one thing that I would say would be important is integrating something like air quality sensors within communities, or even air quality information. So at the moment within Sahel, as an example, we have an early warning project that we are working with the Ministry of Environment, NIMET, and some other government organizations. And the idea behind this project is to provide weather information to the farmers. So this is also something that the government or other agencies, even the private sector, can look into to integrate, even providing air quality information as well to the farmers. And not just providing that information, but for them to also understand the importance of having them. And that's where the idea behind training and capacity building comes in. So when you go into communities, you don't just go into those communities. You go in through community leaders. You go in through maybe faith-based organizations within the community, or cooperative heads within those communities, or even just officers that are familiar with the community and the community members are familiar with them. And so training those heads of the community, allowing them to understand the importance of having these air sensor information and passing it down to the farmers, so that when it occurs and it affects the crops, they are able to understand how and why and what next to do, because those are the people that they trust. So when you think of air quality sensor information, it's important that things like that are also embedded into, I would say, policies when it comes to climate related information. And if we're looking to also develop communities and ensure that information is also getting to farmers, we also have to provide them with what to do, which is why I had mentioned, having maybe low cost air quality sensors, such as clarity nodes. So they can be installed in various horticulture clusters, dairy hubs, poultry pens, and what would happen is that those sensors would provide real-time ammonia and smoke level data, and it would guide ventilation. If you remember, I mentioned earlier how important ventilation is for livestock, especially probably automated ventilation systems to ensure the proper flow of air. And I think another thing also just to mention is there is when it comes to air pollution with government and the environment, there are quite a number of, I would say, government agencies, ministries, and organizations that I believe are working not particularly together, but the work is a bit fragmented and repeated. So something that would help is whatever policies we're trying to integrate air quality information into, it is best that organizations and ministries like the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, basically work together to ensure that whoever it is that's responsible for that aspect of air quality information is carrying that out instead of having to repeat that maybe across multiple agencies and ministries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Howard, for that brilliant insight. Thank you for just, trying to explain the connectivity and how government can come in to curb the effect of air pollution and how it affects all those rural communities. Thank you so much. So let me get to Dr. Akpan. Dr. Akpan is the project coordinator. Apologies, Dr. Akpan. Thank you. He's the professor at the University Department of Geography and Natural Resource Management, University of Nigeria, UU. So from a geographical perspective, is there any correlation between air pollution and air pollution sources, such as gas flaring and industrial clusters, and also patterns of declining agricultural productivities in the Niger Delta?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ethel. Yes, so of course there is, but it differs depending on the various locations in the Niger Delta. I've done a couple of work on climate smart agriculture across the 9 states of the Niger Delta region, interacting with over 54 farming communities across the Niger Delta regions. But one thing for sure is that the magnitude is very low, and also depending on the sources, the air pollution sources, where we have flaring activities or production activities, it's very low compared to, it's very low to where we do not have all of those oil rigs and flaring activities compared to where we have them. For instance, in Kwaibo, even our Eket region, there are a lot of communities that are really impacted by air pollution. And that in turn affects crop production and also human health. So there is a significant relationship between the two. Of course, we air pollutants, just like Prof said earlier. Yeah, we also need crops, of course, to absorb those pollutants. But when it's very certain magnitude, it becomes an issue. It can reduce stunts crops from growing and also reducing their fertility. Because some of the leaves, of course, and some of the physical properties of the crops can start decaying, even if you are using some level of analysis, maybe remote sensing analysis or vegetation cover. You notice that there will be changes. So, but for me, these are just very few spots. They are just very few spots as compared to where, aside from pollutants, air pollution, we also have pollution sources. And other ultra-modern cities. But significantly, yeah, there is a relationship, a very significant relationship between the two.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Akban. Thank you for, spotlighting the relationship between air pollution and, air pollution sources and all of that. So I would like to ask you one more question. Are there any specific environmental changes you have observed that directly affect farming, such as, change in air quality, rainfall patterns, or either soil condition?
Yes, all of those variables affect, of course, it affects production. It affects production. One thing that we are really lacking in the country right now is data collection. I think we are really lacking in that aspect. But if you notice, some of the crops, some of the productivity level has really dropped. Aside from the economy, some of the productivity levels have actually dropped. So the rainfall pattern, of course, are really shifting. This is December, and some parts of the southern Nigeria is still experiencing rainfall. So the interannual variability is becoming more unpredictable, and farmers are having issues with predicting uh, when the rain will come and when they are going to grow their farm, their crops. So it becomes a very big issue. Aside from rainfall shift, of course, there is also temperature is becoming so intense, and uh, if you are planting your crops without considering all of those variables, your crops will start dying, and that will in turn reduce productivity. So aside from pollution, aside from the health of the soil, which has really been, should I say, because of our practices, soils are no more fertile the way they are. And all of these things works in a cycle. They work in a cycle. So I think the most important thing is, just like Prof said, is um, collecting those data and actually analyzing the trends, and making informed decisions for the government and also to the farmers, the local farmers, because sometimes when those crops start dying, they will say it's the gods that is causing it, or probably maybe that's why they are having low yield in production. So these are some of the scientific evidences that we could just put up and inform the government on the best approach. Like I said, we need policies on agriculture around transition. Of course, you also need to bring indigenous knowledge into bear to ensure that both scientific knowledge and those local knowledge are being integrated. Just have a holistic approach in tackling food production. So those are some of the issues. The variables, they are quite much. If you do not test them, you won't be able to actually ascertain which of the variables is.
Okay, I think Dr. Akban's network is pretty bad. I don't know if he can hear me, but we'll get to come back to him.
Most of those
Okay.
crops, some
we lost you at some point.
In no time they are being flooded, So, oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, so
I think It went off again. I can't hear you again now. So I'm going to come back to you for
monitoring systems in being cited in those local.
Hello, Dr. Akpan, can you hear me? I think your network is pretty bad. Okay, so I would like to get back to Prof. Zabi, and I'm glad you're still here with us. Thank you. So I think we have like 2 questions for you, but before we get to the question, Dr. Akpan talked about. Yes, but it's breaking. I mean,
can you hear me now?
Yes, it's clear now.
Okay, so like the last speaker made mention of air pollution sensors, of course, issues that we need to make sure that we try to mount them across various point sources in those local communities. We need to improve our early warning systems so that we could inform the farmer before time when to crop and when not to, and also taking into consideration the local knowledge and also the scientific knowledge. We could just blend the two together. It will help us to actually develop a policy, of course, an agricultural policy that fits well for the farmers and also for the country at large. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Akbar. Thank you. That was really amazing. Thank you for sharing your insight and your expertise. Thank you. So you made mention about policies and how government policies can help reshape the effect of air pollution with respect to agricultural productivity. So I would like to ask Prof. Zabi. Thank you. Thank you for still, you're still here staying with us. Thank you for your time. What policy or institutional reform would most strengthen environmental accountability in Nigeria's agricultural sector? Prof. Zabi, are you still here with us? If you can hear me. Okay. I think I'll have to.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. So should I repeat my question? Hello, Prof. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Hawa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just wanted to.
So I think it's his network.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think we have to come back to Prof. Zabi later. Probably his network is pretty bad. Okay, so let me get to you, Hawa. I think I have few more questions for you. Okay, so what are the biggest barriers to scaling successful environmental or climate smart agricultural solutions across pollution-prone regions like Niger Delta?
Okay, so I in the last question that I had answered, I had mentioned the fragmentation when it comes to government organizations working together. So you do not want, basically, you don't want fragmented. You need them to work together. You need to avoid any sort of repetition when it comes to governance and institutional mandates. Because one thing that we do here when governments are involved sometimes is that this is our mandate and this is our mandate. And when we're talking about the Niger Delta and referring to also agriculture, we also have to look beyond the just the ministries and the agencies that work within the agricultural sector are affected, but we also have to look at the oil and gas companies. And we also have to assess how pollution within the Niger Delta affects agriculture as a whole. Because yes, we understand what is going on in the Niger Delta, but I don't believe that we have that assessment on the effects of what is happening when it comes to agriculture. We have it as an idea, but we don't have it sort of quantified. And I would say within the Niger Delta as well, there is also maybe due to some level of, I would say, or somewhat unrest, there would be a high cost when it comes to getting technology. Like I'd mentioned before, there are things like air sensors, also soil sensors, aerators that are also important for the soil, and it is costly. So most of this is costly. And when you think about agriculture as a whole, they are also generally poorly financed across Nigeria. But when you think of the Niger Delta as being an area where things are a bit different, that lack of financing, that lack of market confidence also blocks any sort of scaling that might occur. And if you had also remembered, I'd also mentioned the importance of training people like extension officers or community leaders within different communities, or maybe things like the impact of air pollution on livestock, the importance of pollution early warning indicators. So when they're not trained on things like that, the farmers are not going to take this up. They don't have that information. The farmers are going to go based on what they know, and in some cases, what they know might be wrong, and there will be low to zero adaptability in those areas. And once that happens, automatically agricultural productivity goes down the drain. And I think another point just to make would also be, I believe what the last speaker had said had to do with data as well. When we are considering a lot of weather and climate and delta and weather information, air quality monitoring is not at the top of the list. Now, imagine what that would be like in rural communities within the Niger Delta within the Niger Delta, where there's already some level of weak water quality for planting, probably limited early warning systems. And in that case, what happens then is that farmers just make decisions based on instinct, which can turn out good in some cases, and in some most cases not so well. And there's also a lack of focus. When we think of the Niger Delta, we're also not thinking of agriculture. We're more or less thinking a lot within oil and gas, and as that is what we have sort of been told drives Nigeria's economy, there is no focus there. So there is no focus on really improving productivity within the Niger Delta. So automatically, that is already a hindrance in that region. And I would also say maybe just a last point as well, or maybe two points as well is, or one, would be that there's also the private sector. As we all know, we cannot all just depend on the public sector and the government to carry out everything. But when we also think of the private sector, We also think of somewhat for-profit organizations, and they generally have to have an incentive within a certain region or a certain area to carry out certain activities or even make certain investments. And with the way the Niger Delta currently is, as a private sector organization, what usually happens is that they're going to avoid the Niger Delta as it's already considered a polluted high risk region due to all the oil spillages and pollution that has spread across even in the air. And the other thing as well would also be, even if they did decide to invest and they did decide to say, oh, we're going to work within the agricultural sector and attempt to increase productivity, as long as there is still some level of insecurity and unrest within the Niger Delta, it would definitely affect any sort of logistics cost or infrastructure. Infrastructure, which costs quite an amount of money, would be damaged. Logistics costs, because if you want to find anyone who's going to want to do that journey or move products from the Niger Delta to other parts of the country, it's going to come at a high cost because there is a possibility they might be risking their lives. And also, they would also be very much worried about the farmers' output. And not just the output, the quality of the output. Like I'd mentioned before, when you think about when you think of cattle, whatever they eat in their own way also gets back to the final consumer. Yes, we do cook the meal, the food, but sometimes there are situations that do happen, and you don't want that to be the effect or your product being the reason why people are maybe falling sick. And also just not really a lot of interventions within agriculture don't also take place within the Niger Delta region, I would say. And so in order to be able to do anything in that region, commitments are going to be required. And without those commitments, both from the private sector, from maybe donor organizations, from the government, scaling in any way, form, or manner will not be possible, or any interventions basically within the Niger Delta region will not be possible if there are no commitments, if there is no actual push to decide that there needs to be change in that region. So just stop there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Hawa. Thank you. So before I go to Dr. Akpan, I think we have a question for you from YouTube. The person is asking, in urban centers like Lagos that has constantly battled with air pollution, has there been any marked decline in agricultural products in recent times?
I'm assuming this is for me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I would say that when you think of Lagos and you think of agriculture, when I think of Lagos, I don't think of agriculture. I usually think of real estate because the way Lagos is currently set up, every piece of land is a building for rent or for sale at ridiculous prices. And where the food hubs are, where people are farming is usually towards the outskirts. So let's say Ekpe, and a lot of people are more into greenhouse gases. Now, I would say that it's not just food production in Lagos that has reduced, but across Nigeria. And that is because most of our agricultural land and production takes place up north, at least, and it then comes down south. Yes, there are a lot of still farmers down south. However, when you think about the land mass of the north, that is where most of the food just come from. So if you also remember earlier in the year, they had also announced Nigeria to be in a state of food insecurity. So that reduction, when it comes to air pollution, yes, can be a contributor, but insecurity and uncertainties around the nation have also genuinely contributed to reduction in productivity of food. And I know that we're also referring to Lagos, but Lagos is also, like you mentioned, more urban center. So, and I know that within Lagos there are little I would call them farmers markets that do take place, that they do sell, products. Smaller businesses do this, not with not with very large amounts of land, but they still do that as well. But but most of the food would also come in from neighboring states, Ogun State, as an example, Ibadan, as well. So the food does come in from there. However, I would say that as well as, even if we want to focus on Lagos being an urban center, most of the food comes in from outside of the state. But in general, within the country, us being in a state of food insecurity or emergency, rather, is also due to a lot of uncertainties that have occurred in the past couple of years around the country, especially up north. So I hope that answers the person's question.
All right. Thank you so much, Howard. Thank you for providing the insight to the question that was asked. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And welcome back, Prof. Zabi. Good to have you back. So we have a question for you. The question goes this: do the oil companies that are the major source of pollution in Niger Delta area active participants in the cleanup efforts by HyPrep?
Yes, because the model we are using for the cleanup as prescribed by Gazette is
all right.
Is polluter pays principle. So they are contributing. Oh God. Hello, Chief Iramko ni on Zoom call. Sorry for that disturbance. So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
So our Gazette that established, the Gazette that established HyPrep prescribes how the various international companies, including the NNPC, should contribute to the cleanup of Ogoni. Of course, HyPrep is currently developing a cleanup template using Ogoni for the whole of the Niger Delta. So our mandate is national, but we are starting in Ogoni. So they contribute the funds to the Ogoni Trust Fund, from where the project coordination office that I coordinate get funds to implement the cleanup. But apart from contributing the funds, they also participate directly in decision making because they are part of the board of trustees. They are part of the governing council of HyPrep, which is the highest decision making body that is chaired by the Minister of Environment. And then they also participate in the cleanup execution at the project coordination. For example, Shell, the former Shell, which is now Renaissance Africa Energy, they have dedicated staff in the project coordination office of HyPrep who are there to support our day-to-day activities. So they contribute to developing the protocols. They also join us for field work. They also do their independent monitoring and give us feedback. So they are directly part of it. Not all the oil companies in the Ogoni area, Shell was the dominant operator. And that is why, and of course, in the joint venture arrangement, Shell has 30% next to the Nigerian government, which is 55%. So that makes Shell to be directly involved in both the governing council and the board of trustees. Other companies like Total are in the board of trustees, but they are not in the governing council. It's only Renaissance Africa Energy that is part of the governing council. And it's only Renaissance that has dedicated staff who are domiciled in the project coordination office that take part in our activities, day-to-day activities. They also attend our management meeting, and they attend most of our events. And so they contribute directly to the formulation of the protocol. It's a problem that requires collaboration, partnership. It requires coming together to solve the problem and to develop a fit-for-purpose contextual framework that is applicable in Ogoni and also broad enough to be replicated in other parts of the Niger Delta and anywhere there is oil contamination. And of course, in monitoring the cleanup, in determining whether the cleanup is effective, especially along the shoreline area, we adopt a model that is participatory, is community, also community driven, that we call SCAT, Shoreline Cleanup Assessment Technique, that brings stakeholders from different sectors, including the local community representatives, HIPREP, the civil society organizations that focus primarily on environmental issues in the Niger Delta, like SDN, SED, SWAYA, and then NOSDRA, NUPROC. So all of us come together to form what we call SCAT. And so the SCAT team do visual observation, they measure the growth of our plant and things, the mangroves that we have planted. And they also determine whether a cleanup grid is cleaned or not. So SCAT can, when they do their survey by pitting, so they dig some pit to see how much oil collects in it. And so with that, they determine whether the grid has passed or not. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach that we're adopting.
Thank you so much, Prof. Sabi. Thank you for providing insight to the question that was asked. Thank you. You have really done great by sharing your expertise with us today. And I know if I leave you, you'll want to go on and on and on and on because the conversation is really interesting. I just want to say thank you, but time is no longer on our side. So I would like to quickly take the wrap-up question from Dr. Akban, and we get to wrap up the conversation. So over to you, Dr. Akban. How can land use changes? Okay. How have land use changes driven by industrial expansion and population growth contributed to soil degradation in Akwa Ibom and its neighboring states? And what are the implications? What implications does this have to smaller farmers? Dr. Akban, are you there? Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Should I take the question again?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. So I was asking, how have land use How have land use changes, driven by industrial expansion and population growth, contributed to soil degradation in Akwa Ibom and its neighboring states? And what implications does this have for smallholder farmers?
Okay, yeah. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
That's a good.
I should call him.
Well, you mean, sorry. So that's a good question. Actually, land use change is something that you don't just see it now and it happens. You need to do a land cover map to actually understand if the land is actually changing or if there's another specific land that is being used for another purpose. For instance, you could say, oh, you could just do an analysis, take images of the states, the vegetative cover, and all of those uh, variables in the last 10 years, last 15 years, in the last 5 years, in the last 20 years. Then you start to of course, the results would show that something that might have happened from maybe a place that was naturally reserved for agricultural productivity has now, say in the next last 5 of environment or a residential unit. So that is when you know if actually the land has been used for another purpose. But aside from that, you could just, as someone that is a resident there, you'll be able to also use your layman knowledge to know that, a lot of expansion, urbanization is really occurring, and a lot of activities is going on. So, coming down to your question, of course, land is changing. We now have population expansion, and we need to feed more people. Of course, there's demand for food, so we need to feed more. So there's need to feed more people. So I think aside from that, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I hear you. It seems we've lost you, Dr. Akpan.
Hi, Dr. Akpan, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but it's breaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here in Akwa Ibom State, there are some places now that were reserved for agricultural purposes. They've now been used for development, especially these developers that have really come in to develop this estate developer. So they've altered local farmers' land, and the farmers, of course, have drifted to other locations, but that is not enough. So there are a lot of expansion activities. There are a lot of expansion downside more markets. So these are really distorted farmers smallholders have been using. So that in turn, of course, has reduced the productivity level. For instance, productivity level, and many people are now going hungry. You know, sometimes you find out that the food
Dr. Akman, we can't hear you again.
Of course.
Hello, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that has reduced production, and because of this growing demand for food. Recently, I think every second Friday of the month, there so the government has said all the civil servants should go and farm. You know, every second executive order for all the villages for agricultural purposes. But of course, that is government policy. Those are some of the measures that the government is trying to develop to ensure that we now have enough productive land for farming. So that is where we are now. The land is changing. There are a lot of road construction. There are a lot of urbanization activities that is currently going on, and that has altered many smallholder farmers. Of course, they are now producing little, and very little is not sufficient for the growing population. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so that is where we are now. We need to incentivize the farmers, of course, because even here over the country, almost 86% of rural population, rural women are farmers. So we need to provide more credit facilities, and of course also empower them into agriculture so that we can meet up with the growing food demand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akman. All right, thank you so much. I think his network is pretty bad. If you can hear me, thank you so much.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. So I believe you're done. Yes. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your insight as regards the question that I asked you earlier. Thank you. That was really amazing. Thank you for spotlighting the facts that we need to do more in terms of sensitization, and also government also need to try to educate these farmers on the need and how to cope the impact of environmental and air pollution as regards to their farm activities and agricultural activities at large. So I would like to this has really been an engaging conversation, and if you leave me, I would love for us to go on and on and on. But like I said earlier, time is no longer on our side. So we have to quickly wrap up in no time, very soon. So, but before I do that, I would like to introduce you all to a product. So, I believe if you're building a business or investing, and also if you're simply trying to stay ahead in this fast changing Nigeria, you already know that information is everything. Information is key. And that's why at Business Day, we created Business Day Premium, and it's something that gives you the kind of insights that decision makers, investors, and industry leaders rely on every week. As a premium subscriber, you get to have access to the following newsletters. You get to have access to sharp Monday analysis that decodes the financial market. You also get to have access to Tipping Point, which is a midweek breakdowns of policies, data and economic shifts. And also you get access to briefings on the margin, which is a deep dive and market moving briefs. Plus, you get access to all things about money, and also you get access to who is thinking for Nigeria. And lastly, you get access to our tax confidential, which would introduce you to everything you need to know about taxation in Nigeria. And also we have heard a whole lot about the new tax law coming up next year. So as a premium user, you get access to, our daily Business Day news written by our award-winning journalists. You get exclusive insights and also an entry to two top-tier Business Day events every year. So all these are what you are going to benefit if you are a premium subscriber on Business Day newspaper. So if you want to stay ahead, if you want to stay informed, and if you want to stay smart, head over to Business Day Premium. Head over to premium.businessday.ng to subscribe now. It won't take so much time, just like 2 minutes of your time, and you're done with your subscription, and you get to enjoy all of these exclusive offers just for you alone. All right. So as we come to the end of today's webinar, I want to briefly say thank you to all of you. I want to sincerely appreciate all of you for joining us today. And I want to, especially thank our guest speakers. Thank you, Hawa. Thank you for bringing your expertise and your insight. Thank you, Dr. Akban. Thank you for, sharing your insight as well. And lastly, thank you, Prof. Zabi. Thank you for staying true with us, even though you had a very tight schedule, but you were still here with us, and you made sure that you provided your insight and your expertise to this topic. Thank you so much. And to our amazing audience, thank you for staying true with us today. Thank you for those of you that asked questions. Thank you for contributing to this conversation. We have already explored a whole lot about agricultural productivity and how the correlation between agriculture productivity and impact of air pollutions in Nigeria, and also how it directly affects Nigeria economy. As you can see, our expert speakers did really justice to the topic, and that's why I'm smiling, because it has been an amazing conversation. I've pretty much enjoyed everything that was shared on this webinar today. And that's why, as usual, Business Day will continue to bring you similar webinars like this, where you get to have access to premium information as regarding topics and feature sections of how to continue to spotlight conversations that move Nigerians forward. So thank you all for joining us today. Like I said earlier, my name is Ethel Adorno. I'm a digital media strategist at Business Day, and it has been my utmost pleasure moderating this conversation today. Thank you all for joining us, and until the next time, please still enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.